Welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. 8 assertive fragrances for powerful men. And this whole notion of toxic masculinity, the fact that it is so pervasive, it's everywhere. And there is apparently no corresponding toxic femininity, that really bugged me. It was a covert attack on men by the far left. And thank God, it's over. Men in their 20s have never been more politically divided than women in their 20s. Men are more conservative, women are more liberal. And even though I'm not a big fan of the far right at all, it does appear that, gentlemen, it is now safe and even fashionable to be a powerful man in the modern world. And I have 8 excellent fragrances for powerful men. Fragrance number 1, this is M7 Oud Absolu. And when it comes to powerful fragrances, there are few more powerful than the original M7 by YSL. And for a number of different reasons. Not only was it a 24-hour beast mode fragrance with a ton of projection, it was also a game changer for the entire fragrance industry because it was oud-based and was the very first designer oud-based fragrance. It became a new thing to have an oud fragrance. And then also, you add to the fact that now Tom Ford became a player. He was responsible for making the drive to oud. He wasn't the perfumer, that was Alberto Marias. But Tom Ford was a creative director, and he became a force to be reckoned with the original M7. That was a very powerful fragrance. Now, this particular fragrance is not as powerful. This is more of a toned-down version that came out in 2011, 9 years after the original. But this is still an extremely powerful fragrance. The longevity isn't quite there. This is more 6 hours than 24, but the projection early on, at least first 2 hours, is really strong and has actually caused me some embarrassment on occasion. And this is an oud fragrance, but it's not a soft oud fragrance. There's no saffron in it. It's basically a lot of warm resins. There's labdanum and myrrh. There's a lot of oud, there's mandarin, and a lot of patchouli. It's a dark, mildly like resinous sweet oud that's not super well balanced, but it'll make you stand out. Definitely powerful in terms of performance and powerful in terms of making a statement. This is a man's fragrance. Fragrance number 2, this is Scandal Eau de Toilette from Jean-Paul Gaultier. And I haven't really talked about the Scandal line to this point, but I'm going to be talking about it more. Usually I've been focusing on the Le Male line, but I tried this and I really like it. I think it's kind of innovative in the fact that it's caramel based. It is the best caramel fragrance that I have tried to date. It is also extremely powerful for an eau de toilette, one of the strongest I've tried. And that's what we're looking for here. We're looking for strong fragrances. Definitely leans more youthful, unless you happen to like sweet or gourmand style fragrances. It's not exactly a gourmand. There's some aromatic notes, but it does lean in that direction. So it has caramel and tonka in the mid. So a sweet caramel, a very pleasant caramel. It has mandarin in the open, and you definitely get a bit of fruity mandarin in the beginning. It also has a clary sage note. Now, clary sage is even stronger than your standard sage note. It is a very strong aromatic fragrance, and it all comes together really nicely. It's a really, surprisingly sophisticated smell for something that, is kind of gourmandy and mass appealing. Really like this. Fragrance number 3, this is L'Odyssée pour Homme Noir Ambre by Issey Miyake. And this is a fragrance that I have frequently compared to Habdan by Parfum de Marly. And Habdan is definitely under the radar. But what I've thought of Habdan in the past is I think of it as a more masculine, older brother type fragrance to Layton. There are a lot of similarities. They both have an apple opening. They're both very, very sweet. But Habdan is marketed to men. Layton is unisex. Layton has florals in the mid. Habdan is much darker and more masculine. And this is very similar to Habdan. It is a little bit fresher, but this is generally thought to be a designer classic. And it is one of the very few fragrances that I've ever tried where, even though it's discontinued and it's hard to get, it may come back on Fragrance Buy, but it hasn't to this point. But it's one of the few that I would recommend if it's about in the $150 range, even going to eBay, because it is that good. So it's an ambery leather fragrance, tonka, vanilla, and amber. And it's got that leather note. It also has a lot of spices. There's cinnamon and nutmeg and saffron. So it's got a fresh quality to it. Smells really expensive. Phenomenally good performance. One of the nicest fragrances in my collection, Noir Ambre. Fragrance number 4, this is Jean Paul Gaultier's Male Elixir. And this is another very, very strong fragrance that is going to be assertive and announce its presence. And one of the interesting things that I never realized about this until recently, it's called Elixir. And I never really looked up the fragrance concentration because this whole elixir thing has made everything quite confusing. And the fact that Jean-Paul Gaultier Le Male Le Parfum was actually an EDP, I just assumed this was an EDP. It isn't. It's actually a parfum. And it really does behave like a parfum in that it's very, very strong. It's almost like Quentin Bisch invented some kind of candy that smells really cool. And it is different. It's a weird combination of honey, tonka, vanilla, and benzoin that just smells a little bit different, but really sweet in a good way. The aromatic notes, the mint, the lavender, and the tobacco are definitely quieter in this than it is in Le Male Le Parfum. And let me be honest with you here. I kept hearing about Quentin Bisch and what a genius he was. I just completely ignored it until I smelled this. It really got my attention, and it's really strong too. It does lean more youthful, unless you like gourmands, but this one is a very masculine, very assertive fragrance. Fragrance number 5 is Encre Noire Sport by Lalique, which might seem like a strange fragrance to be on this list, given that it is a vetiver-based fragrance, generally thought to be quite clean, and a sport fragrance, which are always considered to be kind of fresh and kind of generic. You don't want to offend the other people when you're wearing it in the gym. But the Encre Noire line is different. Honest to God. The extreme version, I don't find extreme at all, but I do find this extreme. And it has to do not with the vetiver note, but the mid note. It's almost like a blast of freshness. It's almost uncomfortable. Think pickle juice, because that's what I thought this smelled like for the first 2 years. It's a combination of a really nice grapefruit note, but that mid note, that evergreen cypress is really fresh. And you combine that with the grapefruit, it's like fresh overload a bit. And that's why I didn't like it. And I don't know if everybody's going to like it, but to me, of all the fragrances I've tried so far in the Encre Noire line, this one makes the biggest statement to me. This one is more in your face. It's just super fresh. Yeah, it's got the clean vetiver, but this one's different. It lasts a long time too. Fragrance number 6 is Lattafa's Asad. And while Dior Sauvage Elixir definitely is an assertive fragrance, this is too. The only difference here is that instead of that blast of lavender off the top, that fresh lavender, you get black pepper instead. It's not quite as fresh, but it's still a blast. And you also get a lot more sweetness here. I don't get the licoricey vibe so much. I mean, if I pretend and kind of use my imagination, maybe I can pick it up, but really it is more of a vanilla-based sweetness. It's actually vanilla and 3 resins, so it's a sweeter version as well. And the spiciness, they use different notes to get the spicy quality, not the cardamom and the cinnamon. This uses a lot of tobacco. But there's a lot of similarities. It's definitely a strong fragrance, definitely a heavy projector, and definitely a statement maker. Fragrance number 7, this is Interlude Black Iris from Amouage. And really, if you're doing a video on assertive fragrances, Interlude or Interlude Man really fits the bill, and the next 2 fragrances are certainly related. Now, this is a more complex version than the original Interlude Man. This is also called Interlude, not Interlude Man, although it is unisex, but it does still lean very masculine. But it's more complex, I think, and more sophisticated. So you've got that Florentine orris that takes 6 years to make. There's a lot of orris in this, and it changes it quite a bit. Now, it is still that incensey interlude man style of fragrance. It smells very much like that, but there's no actual incense in this. What this has instead is a lot of oud. And when it comes to perfumery, because oud is often burned and is quite smoky, oud and incense are somewhat comparable. So there's no actual incense. It still smells like it, but there is a lot of oud, and there are a ton of resins in here as well. Labdanum, myrrh, olibanum, and amber. Yeah, so this is sweet in a resinous way. And if you've never tried Interlude Man, you're going to find that as well. I was surprised when I tried it for the first time just how sweet it could be, but it's sweet in a resinous way. There's a lot of leather in this as well, and woods definitely leans more masculine and definitely is assertive. And finally, we have Supremacy Incense by Afnan, and this is a clone of Interlude Man. Now, it does not have the 24-hour longevity of Interlude Man, but what it does have is quite possibly, it's up there, quite possibly the strongest projection of any fragrance that I own. I mean, it's a tough call. Is it this? Is it red tobacco? I don't know. But man, oh man, this projects. And it is very smoky. It doesn't have an official incense note, but it has a smoke note. So you get that resinous sweetness with a lot of smoke and a lot of projection. Very, very good for the money. I mean, if you're looking for projection, you'll get it here. 6 hours longevity, which to me is fine, but definitely a statement-making fragrance. So it's great that being masculine is in fashion again. It's great that you can be a powerful man without having to apologize for it. I really like that. And hopefully these 8 fragrances will help you be that. Thanks for watching.